This is CBC Vancouver News.
We are doing it because it is right for Canada. It must be done.
Brian Mulroney, Canada's 18th Prime Minister, has died.
Nous votons non.
Plus, a mother claims an injury at an unsanctioned BC martial arts tournament put her son in a vegetative state. And
I think when rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary.
Ottawa is reimposing some visa requirements on Mexican nationals visiting Canada.
I think there's a lot of collateral damage, and I think that's the sad part.
Why and what the impact could be. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Tributes are flowing in for Canada's 18th Prime Minister. Brian Mulroney has died at the age of 84. He led two successive majority governments under the Progressive Conservatives from 1984 to 1993. He negotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement, introduced the GST, and pushed for major constitutional reforms. He also fought against apartheid and acid rain and left office deeply unpopular. Rosemary Barton looks at his life, his time in office, and the strong emotions he evoked in so many Canadians.
His very first foray into politics to become leader of the Progressive Conservative Party brought him a bitter loss. He channeled that bitterness into another leadership run 7 years later. That time, he won handily and renewed the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada with the largest majority in Canadian history at the time. Brian Mulroney created deep loyalties with those around him in unifying the party. Some of those loyalties were later tested and lost. Mulroney came from the small town of Baie-Comeau on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River. Remote and isolated, he grew up in an Irish Catholic family, the son of an electrician at the local paper mill. But his ordinary upbringing was quickly overtaken by his extraordinary life. A close friendship with then U.S. President Ronald Reagan, what many saw as an attempt to change the relationship between Canada and the United States, and a first step towards a free trade agreement between the two countries, something Mulroney had initially opposed. In fact, free trade became the center point of Mulroney's pivotal second federal election in 1988.
Our message is clear. Canada is open for business again.
Bitterly fought, it became about Canadian patriotism.
You've sold us out. I happen to believe that once you...
Mr. Turner, just 1 second.
Once any
you
nation...
do not have a monopoly on patriotism. And I resent the fact that your implication that only you are a Canadian.
Mulroney won his second majority, leaving him lots of room to move forward with bold and potentially controversial ideas, including bringing in the much-disliked GST.
We are doing it because it is right for Canada. It must be done.
As a son of La Belle Province, Mulroney also made promises to recognize Quebec as a distinct society, and he sought to complete something his predecessor and political nemesis Pierre Trudeau failed to do, attempt to win Quebec's signature on Canada's repatriated constitution. That kicked off years of negotiations with the provinces, starting with the Meech Lake Accord. But as it moved towards ratification, some provincial governments had now changed and were suddenly no longer on board.
I believe it's about time that you allow the Aboriginal people to be heard.
A one-day meeting turned into a week-long, last-ditch effort to save the agreement that ultimately failed.
It's a sad day for Canada. This was all about Canada, about the unity of our country.
The disappointment turned to anger from some conservative Quebec MPs who left to form the Bloc Québécois, including one of Mulroney's close friends, Lucien Bouchard. Mulroney never forgave him. And Western Canadians, too, began to feel left out, leading Preston Manning to create the Reform Party, both leading to damaging splits within the Conservative movement down the road. Mulroney's second attempt to get Quebec to sign on to the Constitution came in the form of the Charlottetown Accord. It also failed in 1992 after being put to a referendum. It was the end of a quarter century of constitutional reform in this country, and it was more fodder for those who simply were ready to move on from the Mulroney era. Yet, he still had work to do.
If there are not fundamental changes in South Africa, we are prepared to invoke total sanctions against that country and its repressive regime.
pressuring international partners to denounce the apartheid in South Africa and free Nelson Mandela. It won Mulroney worldwide praise and a visit from a grateful and free Mandela just months after his release. Mulroney signed the Acid Rain Accord with the United States in 1991, earning him kudos from environmentalists. But Canada had wearied of Mulroney after a turbulent 9 years, and he left politics in 1993.
I always tried to do what I thought would be right for Canada in the long term, not what could be politically popular in the short term.
What followed was the start of a long Liberal reign. His successor, Kim Campbell, managed to win only 2 seats. His years after politics were marked with some embarrassing legal battles, including questions about his relationship with the German businessman Karl-Heinz Schreiber, resulting in an inquiry. Mulroney did admit to accepting $250,000 from Schreiber for consulting.
I was fighting for my life and the honor of my family.
The inquiry found the former Prime Minister's dealings with Schreiber were inappropriate and not ethical. Mulroney called it the worst mistake of his life and set to rebuild his reputation. Conservatives once again sought his counsel or his blessing, and the Liberal successor to his old foe, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, counted on his advice during negotiations around NAFTA 2.0. Even in the moments when Mulroney knew he was strongly disliked by many Canadians for his decisions, he believed strongly in why he was doing it.
In the fullness of time, history, and a more reflective nation will tell us whether our hopes for the ultimate success of these policies were in fact realized.
Mulroney marked the history of this country time and time again, and now in his passing, Canadians may reflect on just how much he gave and how much he changed their country.
BC's public safety minister says he's looking into how a repeat sexual offender was released in Kelowna with no public warning. 29-year-old Taylor Jewick was arrested earlier this month in relation to an incident at a Kelowna equestrian school involving a young person.
Both corrections and RCMP have the ability and their standards and things in place. That's why I've ordered an investigation, a full accounting of exactly what happened. I want to know which provincial agencies were involved, which federal agencies were involved, officials involved, because I want to get to the bottom of this, because quite frankly, this should not have happened.
Jewick is now facing charges of sexual interference, invitation to sexual touching, and breach of probation. Kelowna RCMP says it tried to get a public disclosure order about his release, but the threshold was not met based on the totality of the circumstances, and referred the matter to BC Corrections. Jewick is now in jail awaiting a later court date. A mother is suing a number of people and groups connected to a martial arts tournament in BC last fall. She claims the event was unsafe and left her son injured in a vegetative state. Doctors have offered a grim prognosis for Jen Huan Lei, saying the 26-year-old is unlikely to recover after a brain injury put him in a coma. Liam Britton has more on his mother's demands for accountability.
According to his mother, Jen Huan Lei dreamt of becoming a scientist. He was a grad student at UBC studying chemistry. But now, his future is very much up in the air. He's in a vegetative state, spending months in a coma at New Westminster's Royal Columbian Hospital, before being flown back to China this past Sunday. In sworn affidavits, 2 doctors at Royal Columbian offered little optimism, writing, quote, "There is very little likelihood that the condition of Jen Huan Lei will improve or that he will be able to care for himself in the future." His mother, Ying Li, came to BC to be with her only son. In a statement written in Chinese, translated and sent by her lawyer, she said she feels, quote, "as if I have experienced a death." Li is blaming her son's condition on a martial arts tournament last fall, the 2023 Western Canadian Martial Arts Championship. She is suing, alleging organizers did not take appropriate safety measures, and the body that sanctioned the tournament, the World Kickboxing and Karate Union Canada, could not do so, making the event legally unsanctioned. The suit alleges one of Lei's opponents had previously fought as a pro, which should have kept him out of the novice tournament, but organizers still let him fight. These images from a YouTube video show Lei, at left with the yellow trim, in a different bout at the event. Lei was fighting in an event called Continuous Kick Light, but the suit alleges that it was in fact kickboxing, and organizers used a different name to avoid BC's rules for kickboxing events, and to cut costs. The claim says Lay fought another opponent after he appeared injured, and after that final fight, he vomited multiple times and fell in and out of consciousness. He suffered an acute subdural hematoma, a type of brain bleed. It took 90 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. Lay fell into a coma. None of these claims have been tested in court, and no statements of defense have been filed. Lee's lawyer says his client wants answers to many questions.
The matchmaking at this tournament, the officiating at this tournament, the medical response at this tournament, and whether the rules were enforced at this tournament. And what this lawsuit is going to do is get answers to all of those questions.
Now, we asked those named as defendants in the lawsuit for comment, and they mostly declined to comment on those allegations or didn't get back to us. However, organizers say their hearts go out to Lay and his family. Burnaby RCMP have told CBC News that they are investigating, although they didn't provide any more information. Lay's family is now fundraising online to pay for what they say are onerous medical bills that could last a lifetime. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Surrey School District has now removed 4 well-known books from its recommended reading list for students in grade 10 or higher. It says it's concerned over some of the content, but as Saurabh Sandhu reports, the decision is now drawing questions from the Premier.
To Kill a Mockingbird is one of 4 books removed from the curriculum, a decision the Surrey School Board says it made after a thorough review.
We initiated a review of these 4 books in question, and that review was initiated because we received feedback from our families. We received that feedback from parents and caregivers who shared lived experiences of their students in situations in classrooms where they didn't feel safe.
The other books are John Ball's In the Heat of the Night, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, An Absolute Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alex. The school board may be dropping the books, but the school board says there's no ban on them.
What we're saying is they're not recommended because there's a number of other books that are available that cover these same themes. You know, they talk about racial injustice, they talk about racism, and they do it in a way, there's still offensive language in some of these books that we recommend. But the primary reason we're recommending these resources over others is that they give agency and voice to characters from historically racialized, marginalized, or underrepresented groups.
The board's announcement drew sharp reactions from many.
It's a weird decision, and I just encourage the board to have another look here.
These are literary classics that teach important stories about racism and the realities of life at a different time.
BC's education minister also distancing herself from the decision.
School districts and the teachers make this decision.
The school board says 5,000 copies of the books remain available to students through school libraries. The Surrey School Board may have decided to drop these books from the curriculum. However, if a teacher still wants to use these books, they may submit a request to the school board. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Surrey.
A major cleanup effort is underway this week along the lower Alouette River in Pitt Meadows. For decades, a short stretch of the waterway has been building up junk. As Rafferty Baker shows us, there are sunken boats, abandoned docks, and lots more to be hauled out.
It's garbage like this, what's left of an old crumbling fiberglass boat. Most of them have already been hauled out of the Alouette this week, but there are still some in the water. Evidence of more than half a century of neglect. This is what this spot looked like 4 months ago, a mess of abandoned junk.
Dock and debris.
Mark Karras grew up along the river, swimming, kayaking, and cycling along the dikes. Now he's on the board of directors with the Alouette River Management Society.
There's fiberglass boats with engine compartments, with fuel tanks, transmissions, all sorts of contaminants, fiberglass and styrofoam on board. So it became a little bit more alarming to me over time, especially when I was kayaking and I could see what was below the water level.
Karras says beyond this short section, less than a kilometer near the mouth of the river, it's pristine.
Any of the ecosystem salmon, the entire fishery has to navigate this environmental disaster that's at this end of the river.
So Karras and his group started trying to talk officials into doing something. After more than a year of advocacy, the City of Pitt Meadows and Transport Canada agreed to deal with it. The job has been contracted to a company from Brentwood Bay on Vancouver Island.
We do this all up and down the coast of British Columbia.
Adam Coolidge's crew will spend a week here. He says when they're done, about 200 tons of stuff will be removed from the Alouette. It will be taken to a sorting facility, then mostly tossed in a landfill.
Cleaning up, it does feel good, right? And, you know, it's kind of sad that it has to get to this level before somebody says, hey, what's going on here? But, you know, that's everywhere.
Transport Canada is funding this project through its Navigation Protection Program. The agency declined to say how much it's costing to clean up the Alouette River. This is one river that feeds into another river that flows into the Fraser and finally into the ocean. It's a small part of a much bigger problem in BC.
Basically, it's all the products that were built in the 40s and 50s that have now just reached life expectancy and has died. And so we basically go along and clean it up.
Coolidge says when this job is done, he'll be moving on to another one in another BC waterway. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Pitt Meadows.
They have to include more information because now the forms are in more deep about who they are.
Coming up, new rules are in effect after Ottawa announces it's reimposing visa requirements on Mexican nationals visiting Canada. Reaction from travelers after this. And thanks for sticking with us on our commercial-free live stream. As we told you at the top of the newscast, former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has died. He was 84. Before he won the 1984 federal election, he visited Vancouver as part of his campaign.
He climbed up a gangplank to get on board a transport ship. He blitzed through a Vancouver market. Mulroney moved quickly today as if every second counted.
Win this time. All right, we'll win her for you. Absolutely.
The Conservatives did well here in the last election. They want to do better. And they know they have to work harder because the competition is tougher. John Turner and Iona Campanola have the Tories buzzing.
I can't hear you!
Tonight, the Tories did everything they had to do. Their leader came to the riding where John Turner is running. They packed the place and they filled the balconies. Bill Clark has a fight on his hands. His leader came to support him and help him. Mulroney was clearly inspired by the large crowd. He returned to the patronage theme for the first time since he had to apologize for his own unguarded comments on patronage.
Charlie Turner, a senator for Ontario, 60,000. Claude Lajoie, gentleman usher of the Black Rod for the Senate. I'll bet you didn't even know what that was. Neither did he till I told him about the 60 grand.
It was a partisan crowd and a partisan speech. The Conservatives and their leader had a message for John Turner. The Tories are out and ready to do everything to beat him. Jason Moskowitz, CBC News, Vancouver.
The federal government's decision to reimpose some visa requirements on Mexican nationals visiting Canada is prompting decidedly mixed reaction. The new rules, which are now in effect, mean more wait times and a much more stringent entry process. As Shoria Chetri reports, it will make it harder for many Mexicans hoping to visit our province.
Vancouver-based immigration consultant Veronica Diaz says she has received many calls since news of the new visa requirement broke yesterday.
People who are planning to come probably in the next 6 weeks will have to wait and postpone their plans to enter to Canada.
Previously, Mexicans only needed an electronic travel visa to enter Canada, which was much more straightforward. But now they have to go through a 4 to 6 week long application process.
They have to include more information because now the forms are in more deep about who they are, what they're doing, the history back 10 years in work history, and what are the purpose to visit Canada.
Back in 2009, Canada imposed a visa requirement before relaxing it in 2016. Now, the requirement has returned as a way to curb a flood of asylum claims from Mexican nationals, overwhelming the refugee system.
Most asylum claims from Mexico are either rejected by the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada or withdrawn or abandoned by the applicant, and so a change was needed.
Last year, over 25,000 Mexicans applied for asylum in Canada, making it the top source of claims from all nationalities around the world. Some Canadian nationals with Mexican origin are welcoming the move, especially following calls from the U.S. to limit illegal crossings.
I think when rules are being broken like that, then having the restriction is necessary.
But for others, the new requirement comes as a major deterrent.
That's very upsetting for us because we are trying to make Canada a living. So for our family, it means another step or another boundary.
I think there's a lot of collateral damage, and I think that's the sad part.
A refugee claimant advocate adds the move will no longer make Canada a safe haven for Mexican asylum seekers.
Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a journalist, to be a member of the LGBTQ community, to be a woman. And so having that ability for people to come and make an asylum in Canada was wonderful.
The new visa requirement is expected to affect roughly 40% of all Mexican travelers to Canada. Shoria Chetri, CBC News, Vancouver.
There's a live shot of Harbour Centre. We are due for more rain on the south coast and snow on the mountains. Darius will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
Prime Minister Brian Mulroney didn't have to go through the crowds kissing babies. He brought his own along, Nicholas, plus his wife Mila and their other 3 children. Of course, it was a little difficult to see much of the fair. A circle of interested spectators and media followed every move.
Well, welcome to Canada. Have a good time.
Mulroney's schedule calls for a visit to all the Canadian pavilions. No diversions, except one.
Hot dogs?
2, please.
2 hot dogs and
What do you want?
2 with ketchup. 1 with mustard. No mustard and Coke. Okay, just a Coke.
Unfortunately, the pop machine didn't work, so the Prime Minister couldn't get a Coke. With crowds wondering what all the fuss was at the hot dog stand, the Mulroneys pressed on.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. There we are. Thank you.
What do you think of the pavilion?
I loved it. Very impressed with all of them. Oh, yeah. I thought that it was going to be I hoped it would be a great success, and it has been. Just delighted. Great for British Columbia, great for Canada.
Thank you. I'm from Ontario.
Well, where in Ontario?
London.
Oh, Neil and I just came from there. We were down there about 2 weeks ago. We had a great visit.
The next stop, the BC Pavilion. The Mulroneys will be back for another day at the fair, just like regular folks.
Hi, how are you? Hi, nice to see you.
Connie Monk, CBC News, Vancouver.
I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 12th, join CBC Vancouver's Michelle Elliott at the YWCA City Shifts free event, Reimagining Our Cities, Advancing Equity in a Polarized Time. For more information, visit ywcavan.org. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Time for our BC-wide weather forecast with science and climate specialist Darius Madavi as we look at a wet-ish forecast, but good news for the mountains.
Yes, that's right. So most of that precipitation, especially here on the lower mainland, coming at those higher elevations. So good news in terms of the snowpack and good news for anybody looking to do some mountain sports. But by just a few days ago to mid next week, if you take that period, looking at a full meter of snow for most of the local mountains. So some good news there. And if we roll this forward, you can see a lot of that snow coming. Still some showers expected tomorrow morning for parts of Vancouver and the island, but most of that coming at those higher elevations and as snow. Freezing levels are quite low, so even close to the shore in some places, especially on Vancouver Island, you could expect to see a little bit of a flurry rather than some of that rain that we might be traditionally expecting. Now, if we zoom out to the rest of the province, you can see plenty of activity still in the south as some more disturbances roll up and drop a decent amount of snow in some places, especially in those higher elevations. Most of those weather warnings have come down now, so a little bit of good news. Still on some mountain passes, watch out for those winter storm warnings because winds and snow will also be high. Now, a little bit of snow possible for the northeast where we could really use it, but still not too much, it looks like, on the way. Still looking quite dry there. But overall, in terms of the province, a little bit of good news, particularly for the south coast and for the southeast. South coast especially needs that snow, so a little bit of good news there. But again, not all coming as the snow, because precipitation also on the way in the form of rain for many of these areas. Now, keep in mind, this is not showing you just rain. This is showing you precipitation in all its forms. So along the coast here, a lot of that will be coming as rain, but at those higher elevations and in Whistler, that is also going to be falling as snow. So don't worry too much. It's not going to be rain there. In terms of conditions across the province, you can see the sun coming out in a couple areas tomorrow, but for the most part, we still do have plenty of precipitation on the way. And in terms of a 5-day forecast here in Vancouver, we can still expect some thunderstorms possible tonight into tomorrow morning, potentially in the afternoon as well. Low chance, but it is at this time of year, it is possible as we get that convection. But beyond that, just lots of showers possible. And next week, we're going to get some more Arctic air in and stuck in place, and that might mean another chance of some snow.
We wait to see. Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And that is your late news for Thursday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news at any hour, check our website, as you do, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Have a good night.